Hello, true crime fans, and welcome back to the True Crime Never Sleeps show. As always, I'm your host, Larry Lease. And if you don't know, we are actually postponing all our previously scheduled episodes and really just focusing on the recent murder of Charlie Kirk. And so, right now, the big question is, did Tyler have help from someone? They're actually now beginning to open the area where Charlie Kirk was murdered. I mean, it was obviously a big, massive crime scene, but the school is going to start again this week, and they're starting the process of opening everything back up. But there's still so many questions. In terms of the alleged assassin, Tyler Robinson, the governor has said that they believe that he acted alone. But there are questions about whether that's really possible. Could no one else have really known? And is it possible that investigators are just saying that are saying that they believed he acted alone to throw people off who they are investigating? And that's something I'm going to get into on today's episode. Also, something else that we've heard out around the discussion of this case that Axios is now reporting is they're saying that federal and state law enforcement officials are examining leftist groups in Utah to see whether they had knowledge of the alleged shooter's plans beforehand, or even if they lent material support to him afterwards. But that really begs the question, investigating these leftist groups, what does that really mean? How do those investigations work? It's something that I was really, really interested in, especially since many of these groups just now exist online and people just have these anonymous names. And it's hard for, like us journalists to really track who's saying what. How does that investigation work? Well, it's something I'm going to discuss as well in this episode. And many times it requires federal judges to sign off if they want to do undercover operations and really dig into these groups. And are they actually doing that? Is that something they're doing in this case? Is it already going that far? I'm going to go look into it. Something from the new Axios reporting that really stood out to me. We've heard similar things that, like I mentioned, that federal and state law enforcement are now examining far left groups. Excuse me. Examining far left groups in Utah to see whether they had prior knowledge of the alleged shooter's plans, or, like I mentioned, possibly lent material support to him afterwards. From what I've learned so far, the first thing investigators have to do is identify how these groups communicate. That used to mean things like shortwave radio way back in the day. Then it evolved into internet forums. And now it's mostly social media like Twitter, or probably more likely, what's it called? WhatsApp, or the crap, I can't even think of the other one. Telegram, or whatever it's called. Starts with a T. I know it's something. Because, I mean, you're not going to find this on Facebook's front page or in some obvious place. Investigators have to dig, or really dig, to find the entry points. One critical thing I found out is that agents are required to have informants. So across a place like Utah, someone usually knows someone who can provide that first crack in the wall. It might just take one connection, just one open window to get inside. From there, investigators have to decide how deep they want to go. And they can't just do that on their own. If they want to go deeper, like start tapping communications or embedding someone, they need a judge's sign off. There's a specific type of investigation they might use called a 100 case. It's a designation for investigating an entire organization, not just one or two individuals. But these are rare. Judges don't like to authorize them unless they're real, credible evidence. From what I've found, you can't just say, we think this group is bad. There needs to be proof, like evidence of weapons, violent planning, or some kind of imminent threat. If a judge approves a 100-level investigation, then things move to another level. Wiretaps, monitoring of social media feeds, possibly even embedding undercover agents or informants. But all of this takes time, months, maybe longer. It's not instant. And it only happens if the early stages of the investigation show real signs of organized violence. If the deeper they go, the less they find, that kind of case never gets opened. So in this specific situation, if they did begin looking into these groups after Charlie Kirk's assassination, they're still in the early stages. And again, it's not easy to open a case on a whole organization. Even if a group is saying radical things online, if they're not actually moving towards violence, They legally can't just be investigated in that way. I also found out that any undercover investigation or full on infiltration requires regular review by a judge. It's not a one time sign off, it has to be renewed, maybe every month or every 3 months. They monitor how justified the investigation still is. If the threat level drops, the case closes. If it's just a typical investigation into one or two people, for example, in a murder or terrorism case, they might not need a judge at the outset to place an informant. But when it comes to infiltrating a group, that's a whole different level. And it takes a lot more legal groundwork. The governor here in Utah has said publicly that they believe Tyler Robinson, the suspect, acted alone. They've also confirmed that his romantic partner is trans and transitioning from male to female. And according to the governor, this person has been, quote, incredibly cooperative. But I keep asking myself, based on this case and Brian Koberger's murder case in Idaho, are they telling the truth and trying to protect this individual, or are they bluffing? When someone is described as being so cooperative over and over, it starts to make me wonder, maybe there's more going on behind the scenes. Are they trying to send a signal to someone? Or are they actually trying to prevent that person from shutting down and going silent? What really stood out to me was this. If someone sends a text right after a murder that says something like, the rifle is wrapped up, I dumped it, it needs to be picked up, that says a lot. That implies they know what the rifle was used for. That's not just a casual message. You don't just say, hey, grab my rifle without sparking questions like, what rifle? What happened? And if no one asks those questions, or if they already know the answers, then that's a major red flag. In situations like this, if someone is cooperating, you don't want to rush in and slap handcuffs on them. But if at some point law enforcement determines the person is no longer just a witness, but possibly a suspect, everything changes. Legally, everything has to be handled differently, from reading them their rights to letting them know they can have a lawyer. That shift can totally shut down cooperation. It also made me think, what if this romantic partner is their window into the broader world that investigators are trying to understand? If there are deeper connections to online communities, anonymous accounts, or extremist groups, that person could be the key. Someone like that could become what's called a cooperating witness, and cooperating witnesses are incredibly valuable. These kinds of witnesses can fall anywhere on the spectrum, from people who just want to help to people who are facing charges and are cooperating to avoid prosecution. Either way, they can provide real insight into what's going on inside a group or a network. But there's also a major risk. If word gets out that someone is cooperating, especially with law enforcement, no one from a radical group is going to trust them again. Their value drops dramatically. But one thing I want to be very clear about is no one is suggesting that LGBTQ groups are being investigated as a whole. What is being looked at are fringe groups that may use the LGBTQ identity as a front or as justification for violence. It's not about the larger community, it's about the radical fringe. And of course, we don't even know for sure what these groups are yet, if they even exist in this context. But we're talking about the far, far fringe. These aren't mainstream groups, these would be tiny radical organizations that may have extreme views and may have advocated violence. Now, back to Tyler Robinson. Is it possible he acted totally alone and no one knew? Yes. I have to admit that technically is possible, but based on everything I've seen so far, I do believe that's what actually happened. Well, no, I don't. Still, even if I were directly involved in this case, I'd probably be saying the same thing law enforcement is saying right now, that he acted alone. Why? Because if someone's cooperating, the last thing you want is to scare them off. If people think they're about to get exposed or arrested, they might stop talking entirely. So a lot of what's said publicly may be strategic. It's tough investigating a case like this, especially one that's gotten so political. The moment it hit the news, people started trying to frame the suspect, Tyler, in a way that fits their own agenda. Some said he was far right, then the next day others were saying he was far left. Everyone wanted to label him something. But for me, none of that matters. I have to go off the facts, and the facts are complicated. The governor has come out strongly saying that this was a case of far left extremism. He even used the word indoctrination. Maybe that's true, but I've also seen how fast these things get hijacked by the political machine, how the narrative takes off before the real investigation is even halfway done. It reminds me of another situation. A white supremacist had opened fire on a group of kids at a Jewish community center. What's important here is that the shooter had been a member of a known hate group, but he'd left that group months before the attack. Despite that, the immediate question from high ups was, why weren't you still following him? But under the rules that guide these kind of investigations, rules in place by federal judges and even the attorney general, you can't keep surveilling someone after they leave a group unless you have new legal grounds. Technically and legally, they're no longer part of the case. Still, when things like this happen, investigators get second guessed constantly. Everyone wants answers, and often they want a specific kind of answer that fits their narrative. But real investigations don't work that way. You can't go in trying to confirm a bias. You have to call balls and strikes and just follow the evidence. And believe me, I know from everything I've looked into, there are times when pressure from the top can get intense. I remember reading about a case where someone was like days away from committing a violent act, and instead of arresting him immediately, a supervisor pushed for a wiretap. Not because it was needed, but because it would make the investigation look more complex and more impressive. That's not how this should work. You don't delay preventing violence just to improve optics. But these tensions between investigators on the ground and people higher up in the chain are real. Most people involved are mission focused. There's always a few thinking about career moves, headlines, or politics. And that's what makes this case so tricky. The suspect, Tyler Robinson, is reportedly not cooperating with investigators. What that usually tells me is he's talked to a lawyer. And when that happens, things change immediately. A good defense lawyer will paint the most frightening picture possible. Life in prison, lethal injection, whatever the harshest consequences, they'll spell it out in vivid detail. They'll tell their client, don't say another word. And suddenly, someone who may have been ready to talk goes completely silent. That seems to be exactly what's going on here. From what I've gathered, the moment legal counsel entered the picture, everything shut down. It's a common pattern. By the way, Utah still has the firing squad as an execution method. And there was a case from 1984 where the guy is actually still on death row waiting for that sentence to be carried out. The laws here are different. That might be something Robinson's legal team is thinking about. I've spent a little time in Utah before for vacation and traveling to a new job. But, excuse me. What really struck me with this case is how much empathy has been expressed, not just for Charlie and his family, but even for the family of the alleged assassin. This kind of compassion isn't something you see everywhere. But you contrast that with the online world, and it's completely a different universe. There was a thread on Twitter that explored the similarities between extreme far left and far right groups. I know I've been focusing a lot on the far left angle here because that's where the reporting is currently pointing. But the truth is, both extremes can be equally dangerous. They may be on opposite sides ideologically, but when it comes to tactics and threat level, they can mirror each other in disturbing ways. The people at the extreme ends are often operating from the same playbook: isolation, radicalization, sometimes violence. There's also new reporting from the New York Times that adds another dimension to all this. According to them, the day after Charlie Kirk was killed, someone in a Discord group chat that included Tyler tagged him in a message. The FBI had just released two grainy surveillance photos of a skinny guy in sunglasses and a hat walking through a stairwell at Utah Valley University, asking the public for help identifying. The message said, "Well, where are you at?" with a skull emoji, suggesting that the person looked a lot like Tyler. Robinson replied with a minute. He wrote that his doppelganger was trying to get him out of trouble, or get him in trouble, excuse me. That's incredibly telling, not just that he saw the images and responded, but the language he used, almost deflecting but not denying. And then another user wrote, Tyler killed Charlie. That was around 1 p.m. on Thursday afternoon, according to the Times. Robinson wasn't arrested until later that night, about 34 hours after the shooting. These Discord messages are the clearest look yet at what his state of mind may have been in the hours after the assassination. The New York Times got them from someone who knew Robinson in high school and stayed in touch via that group chat, which has about 20 members. The source asked to stay anonymous, fearing harassment just for being associated with Robinson. If these details are true, and so far the New York Times is the only outlet reporting them, it raises even more questions about how much Robinson was willing to engage after the crime. Why respond at all? Why not go dark? Was it arrogance, fear, or did he think he could still slip away unnoticed? That's something I want to keep digging into. There's still so much we don't know, so many layers. But before I go, I want to leave you with something. They started a memorial for Charlie Kirk, sidewalk chalk, messages scattered all over the grounds, notes, prayers, drawings. It's one of those moments where you feel how deeply this tragedy has affected people. So, of course, we continue to think about Charlie's family, his kids, his wife. And with that, give me your thoughts on this case in the comments section below. And of course, give us a thumbs up if you like our video. Hit that subscribe button down below. And if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.